Well, the United States come off their second straight Nations League title this past summer, but it's a quick turnaround here for the third edition as CONCACAF still have to decide their 6 representatives who will take place in next year's 2024 Copa America. Guys, Matty G back here with you on Football with Flags. Thanks so much for joining us as always as we give you today our League A predictions. Like we said in the intro, guys, this edition of Nations League has much bigger implications than years past. The opportunity to go to a Copa America next summer. And like we've seen in the past with the first 2 editions of this contest, 12 teams in League A. It's been expanded to 16 teams this time round, and this is how it shakes up. The top 4 teams in no particular order ranked by CONCACAF, the United States, Mexico, Costa Rica, and Canada have already gotten through to a bye to the quarterfinal stage. Therefore, we've got 12 teams in 2 groups of 6 to decide the final 4 spots in the quarterfinal knockout stage to then determine from there, out of those 8 teams, which 6 will represent CONCACAF in Copa America next summer. Now, before we get to those rankings, though, at least want to give a quick overview of each group. As you can see, the ranking via the latest CONCACAF index next to each flag in terms of where all of these nations currently stand. And once again, show that, again, the top 2 teams will advance to the quarterfinal stage. And as for the bottom 2 teams in each group, will get relegated to Group B. So we'll start off with Panama, who had a fantastic run all the way to the final of the Gold Cup this past summer before losing out to Mexico. A really strong run. They beat the United States in their semifinal in a penalty shootout. And again, this team made their first World Cup appearance in 2018. Started to drop off a little bit, but they've certainly had gained some momentum here the last summer or 2 in terms of their play. And again, remember, they were in the Nations League semifinal back in the summer as well, but got knocked out by Canada. As for Guatemala, a really solid run in the Gold Cup this past summer. Quarterfinal appearance for losing out to Jamaica. This team started out in League C in 2019, worked their way up to League B, and here they are in League A with an opportunity to go to a quarterfinal to maybe appear in a Copa America next summer. As for El Salvador, been very inconsistent back and forth. They put on a decent performance in the Gold Cup this past summer with an 0-2-1 record, 2 draws. Again, still kind of in limbo. It'll be interesting to see how this team fares against this group. I think they'll certainly be competitive still, but again, a lot to play for. As for Martinique, League A the entire way ever since we started CONCACAF Nations League, but really haven't gotten anywhere with that. They got bumped out in the Nations League, Gold Cup group stage as well this past summer. As for Curacao, really solid run in 2019 in the Gold Cup, quarterfinal appearance, but they've kind of fallen off ever since. Again, a really good opportunity here for them with their schedule to get some points and maybe make some noise and possibly squeak into those top 2 spots. We'll have to wait and see for them. As for Trinidad and Tobago, they were in League B last time around during Nations League. Got bumped out in the group stage in the Gold Cup. But again, remember, the biggest reason they are here was because, again, Nicaragua was banned due to some issues from the Gold Cup, as well as competing here for this edition of Nations League. So they got bumped down to League B, while Trinidad took their spot in League A. On to Group B we go, where we'll start with Haiti, who had a group stage exit after a difficult result against Honduras in their last game. Qatar taking the second place spot out of that group in the Gold Cup to advance to the quarterfinal. This Haiti team definitely has the potential, in my opinion, to make it to the quarterfinal stage of this Nations League competition. We'll have to see how consistent they can be, though, through these 4 games. As for Jamaica, really solid run. They get to the semifinals, but a disappointing result against Mexico. Really thought they would play a lot better in that game, especially just considering how good this team looked during the group stage. But unfortunately, it just wasn't meant to be. A great chance here for them to get to a Nations League quarterfinal and really show what this team could do down the road. I know they'd be chomping at the bit to play in next year's tournament as well. As for Honduras, played a little bit better than I honestly expected in the Gold Cup. They finished 3rd in 2019 in the first edition of Nations League. I think that this team definitely has a better chance, considering the schedule that they have for these 4 games, with a chance to maybe make some noise and get into one of those top 2 spots. As for Cuba, really disappointing run in the Gold Cup this past summer. They go winless, a -6 goal differential. They were promoted to League A after the last edition, so a good chance here for them. Again, a decent schedule. I definitely think it's going to be tough for them. They're going to have to certainly get points at home if they want to at least have a shot, but we'll have to see what they can do. As for Suriname, this team made it to the 2021 Gold Cup. They were in League B in 2019. They've gotten themselves up and stayed here for a little while. Again, they get to face off against Grenada twice, I believe, in these 4-game stretch. So that's an opportunity for them to take 6 points away, both home and away, if they can do it. But we'll have to wait and see. And as for Grenada, the lowest ranked team in League A, this team did not qualify for the Gold Cup. They started in League B in 2019, have pushed their way up. They're a competitive side. I definitely think a team that's better at home than on the road. But again, I think a tall task at hand for them with the schedule that they have, even despite the fact that they play Suriname, which you could arguably consider the second worst team in this group. They've got to play them twice during this 4-game stretch. There they are, our Group A predictions, as we've got Panama and Guatemala advancing, but it's certainly a tight window, as we had El Salvador scoring 7 points as well, but getting bumped out due to goal differential, which is something I want to talk about, because keep in mind, Panama and Guatemala will face each other twice during this 4-game stretch. As for El Salvador, they'll play Martinique twice, who again beat them 2-1 in the group stage of the Gold Cup this past summer. They got a red card early in that game. El Salvador had a ton of chances for a good portion of that one to come back, equalize, or maybe even win that game, and they failed to do so. So certainly I think a chip on their shoulder in terms of that fixture. The fact that they get to play them twice, I think, is very important. I do have Martinique and El Salvador tying when Martinique is the home side, but then I've got El Salvador winning at home against them the second time round. Again, I think it's a toss-up. I think El Salvador have a good chance if they can add a few more goals to possibly get a goal differential advantage over Guatemala, if Guatemala certainly can't get the points they need off of Panama. But I do look at that game that Guatemala has against Trinidad and Tobago in their 4-game stretch as an opportunity to really advance their goal differential. I don't know if they'll do it by a ton, but I just feel like that's a game to circle that could be very beneficial for them, as well as just beating El Salvador. That's the first game that these two have to play against each other in September. Guatemala will be the home team in that fixture. As you can see, Martinique and Trinidad and Tobago down at the bottom, each tied with 4 points. Trinidad being relegated due to goal differential. Again, I think that could be tough for them as well. I just think Martinique has battled well with their opponents that they've had recently, especially this past summer. I think they'll continue to do that this fall. Again, I think that could go either way as well in terms of Trinidad staying up and Martinique going down. But I feel pretty confident Curacao will sit there at the bottom of the table. I just don't see them doing enough against each of these sides. But again, I think Group A is a very, very tight spot between especially those top 3 teams, with an opportunity for only just 2 to advance. And this is how we've got it going down for Group B. Jamaica sitting at the top of the table with 10 points, only dropping points in their final game against Haiti on the road. As for Honduras, they start things off with Jamaica. I do believe they'll lose that game, but then they follow things up with a game against Grenada and then 2 games against Cuba, which I do think that they'll secure 9 points in those 3 games. Unfortunately for Haiti, 2 games against Jamaica, a lot more difficult than the schedule Honduras has in terms of their 4-game stretch, and I do believe that's why they'll fall just short in terms of their chase for these top 2 spots. As for Suriname, I think they'll beat Grenada twice, secure themselves 6 points, looking pretty comfortable, and get a spot to stay in League A. As for Cuba and Grenada, possibly both being relegated after these 4 games. Again, very difficult. I wish Honduras and Haiti would get to play each other the same that we'll be seeing Guatemala and El Salvador do so in Group A. But unfortunately, that's just not the way the schedule was drawn this time around, which I do think is going to hurt Haiti in the long run and give Honduras an opportunity to qualify for the quarterfinals. Now, before we go any further in this video, I'd just like to point out that I am not a huge fan of how this schedule unfolds. I know it's a tight window between now and the spring to get all of this done, to get to the knockout portion of this tournament, to decide the 6 teams that will advance. And the fact that we're only playing 4 games in the group stage, it is what it is. But the fact that we have a lot of overlapping fixtures in terms of seeing like Martinique and El Salvador play twice, Suriname and Grenada play twice, Honduras and Cuba twice, which I think is very interesting to point out, because again, I think that based off of our predictions, that is going to help propel Honduras to a spot in this quarterfinal round, as opposed to Haiti, who has a tougher road ahead where they've got to play Jamaica twice, rather than at least playing someone else in the group. I'm not 100% sure as to why they did that. I don't know if it's travel expenses, other costs, what have you. I still have to do some digging to try and figure that out, but that's just the way everything's fallen for this time round. Again, I know it's a tight window and we only have a certain number of dates before all this has to get situated by the end of next spring to start next summer. But it is what it is. As you can see here, again, just a potential look at how a bracket might unfold. Again, this isn't set in stone. This isn't, for sure locked in that if based off how these teams finish 1-2 in their group, this is how they'll line up. It's just a potential look at how things might unfold. So if out of the 4 teams that we have, could see maybe Guatemala take on Mexico, which I think would be a very interesting matchup, especially depending on where that game could be played. If we see a great following like we did during the Gold Cup for Guatemala fans, Honduras possibly could face off against Canada. I think that's big, especially considering John Herdman, their manager, has just recently resigned. A lot of stuff still up in the air for that federation as well. The United States going up against Panama, who they just saw in the semifinals of the Gold Cup, and then Jamaica with an opportunity to go up against Costa Rica. I think that could be a high-flying game with a lot of goals, a lot of action going back and forth. But again, just a potential look and draw things up in terms of how a bracket might unfold. But guys, thanks again so much for watching. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't already done so. And we're going to have plenty more content coming out about the Nations League as well down the road as everything unfolds, along with the Asian Cup, stuff going on in Africa for World Cup qualifying, other stuff going on in the women's game, you name it. Anything that we can get our hands on and talk about, we're definitely going to try and do so make sure you stick around with us if you can, and I hope you all have a blessed day, and we'll see you soon.